The apartment wasn't beautiful in the way magazines promised. It didn't have marble countertops or polished wood floors. The light flickered in the hallway no matter how many times we called the landlord. The heater made odd clanking sounds in the winter, like an old man coughing into silence. The tiles in the bathroom had hairline cracks, and one of the windows never closed all the way. But it was home. A lived-in kind of home. The kind that smelled faintly of toast and overwatered plants. The kind where comfort crept in slowly, like sunlight through curtains that were never fully drawn. There was a rhythm to our life, soft and undisturbed. He liked his coffee strong. I liked mine with too much cream. He took his showers in the morning. I took mine at night. The radio in the kitchen always played the same playlist, half acoustic, half forgotten 2000s ballads. Neither of us changed it. Some things didn't need improving. He always wore mismatched socks on Wednesdays and pretended it was on purpose. I never called him out on it. The truth is, I found it endearing. Like the way he always hummed when stirring pasta, or how he never turned off the light in the hallway unless I reminded him 3 times. I didn't mind. That's how you know you've settled into something real. You stop noticing the flaws and start folding them into routine. We were 3 years in, not newly in love, not bored. Somewhere in the middle, where real life happens. We talked about bills, joked about the neighbors, took turns buying groceries. There was a system to it all. He cooked dinner on Fridays. I did the dishes. He handled rent. I handled laundry. There were days when we barely said anything, and it didn't feel like distance, just comfort. A silence we both wore like a blanket. Our friends called us stable. His mother said I brought out a calm in him. We were invited to weddings together, birthdays, baby showers. People always assumed we were next. I let them. So did he. There were evenings when we'd lie on the couch, his legs across mine, scrolling silently through our phones, and he'd randomly say something like, "Do you think we'll ever live in the suburbs?" I'd shrug. He'd smile. And then we'd return to scrolling. That was our way of dreaming. Quietly, casually, without urgency. And for a long time, I believed we were exactly what we appeared to be. 2 people with routines and history, and a shared toothbrush in the bathroom that neither of us remembered buying. That belief was a soft, worn thing, the kind you don't question, until something sharp tears right through it. There was something sacred about the way the days folded into each other without ceremony. Tuesdays were for Thai takeout, always from the place on 12th Street where the owner knew our names. Thursdays were for laundry. Sundays meant the crossword puzzle he never finished, and I never started. We had routines inside routines. Morning kisses that always landed a little too close to the jaw, the way he tapped twice on the back of my hand when passing the remote. The small pile of coins he always left on the counter from his pockets. It didn't feel like repetition. It felt like structure, the quiet scaffolding of us. There were times I'd catch myself smiling in the middle of something mundane, folding his t-shirts just the way he liked, refilling the jar of cashews he always emptied by midweek, making sure his lucky hoodie was clean before game night with his friends. Those things weren't chores. They were small, invisible ways I said, "I see you, I know you, I'm here." His family adored me. His sister used to send me funny reels at midnight, like we shared a secret language he wasn't part of. His mother once gave me a recipe notebook and said, "I want you to add your own pages to this one day." I'd smiled, touched in a way I didn't have words for. In her eyes, I wasn't temporary. I was already part of the family. And he didn't object. He just rested his hand on my knee and said, "Mom's already planning the wedding." It was half a joke, but only half. We didn't talk about forever often, but when we did, it sounded easy. Like the time he looked at a house listing and said, "Imagine a garden in the back. You'd kill all the plants, though." Or the morning I found him sketching something in a notebook and he mumbled, "Just mapping out how to turn a guest room into an office." It didn't occur to me to ask, "For who?" I assumed I was in the blueprint. So when he started changing his passwords, I didn't question it. Not at first. He said something about updating security. I nodded. When he began sleeping later than usual, claiming stress, I brought him tea without milk. He said it helped him sleep. He started bringing his laptop into the bathroom. I laughed and called it ridiculous. He smiled but didn't explain. I didn't press. That was how trust worked, wasn't it? You give the benefit of the doubt, even when it feels like you're handing over something irreplaceable. There was a time when I would have said I knew every version of his silence, the tired one after a long shift, the distant one when he was lost in thought, the playful silence when he was pretending to ignore me for stealing the last fry. But lately, there was a new kind. He spoke less, yes, but it wasn't the quiet that hurt. It was the way his quiet no longer made space for mine. Some nights he came home with a plastic bag of groceries, but forgot half of what we usually bought. No oat milk, no grapes. He used to remember every detail. Now he asked me what brand of laundry detergent we used, as if he hadn't lived with me for 3 years. There were lipstick stains on one of his collars once. Not red, just a subtle pink. Enough to doubt myself, but not enough to accuse. I washed it anyway. Carefully. Like the fabric might confess if I scrubbed it right. His phone, once left charging face up on the nightstand, now lived inside his jacket pocket, even when we watched TV. He started locking the bathroom door, even when just brushing his teeth. He claimed it was habit. I nodded. I kept nodding. It was easier than asking why the man who used to walk naked across the living room now couldn't floss without a barrier. One evening while he was in the shower, I sat on the bed folding his laundry. A text popped up on his tablet, still linked to our shared account. Just a flash of a name I didn't recognize and a message. "Miss you already. Last night was..." It disappeared before I could see the rest. I didn't click. I didn't need to. There was a feeling, like cold water seeping into socks. Slow, I kept folding. A small hole in one of his shirts caught my eye. He never noticed holes. I always patched them, but that night I set the shirt aside. It wasn't rage that began to grow, not suspicion, not yet. Just a steady dullness in my chest, a weight without panic, like knowing the rain is coming, but still finishing your walk. I told myself he loved me, that I loved him, that love was messy and imperfect, that people drift but come back. I told myself everything except the one thing I should have, that maybe this was no longer love at all. The night everything began to unravel, I wasn't looking for answers. I was syncing my phone, that's all. A routine update to the shared cloud we had created years ago, back when merging lives meant merging logins, playlists, reminders. I don't remember why I opened the Photos app. Maybe I was looking for that picture of us from the lake house, the one where his hair was a mess and my smile looked embarrassingly wide. Maybe I was just bored. Whatever the reason, I tapped without thinking. The screen flickered. Then, new shared album recently added. It took a moment to register what I was seeing. A hotel mirror, a half-empty wine glass, a shirt, his shirt, crumpled at the edge of the bed, a woman's hand resting gently on his chest. I froze, not because I was shocked, but because I wasn't. There it was. The thing I had pretended not to know, presented so casually by a system we'd trusted to store our lives. I clicked again. More images. Kisses not meant for me, poses too familiar to be innocent, captions in a tone that wasn't mine. Counting down the days, finally hours. Can't wait to make it official. The last one hit harder than the rest. Official. Like I had been something temporary, a filler, a warm bed until the real thing arrived. I put the phone down, walked to the kitchen, and poured myself water. My hands didn't shake. My breath didn't hitch. The stillness inside me had settled long before the truth did. I stared out the window into the dark courtyard, the kind that always smelled of wet concrete and forgotten cigarettes. A breeze pushed the curtain slightly. I watched it move as if the world had offered a sigh just for me. He came out of the bathroom minutes later, hair damp, towel slung over one shoulder. He smiled, asked if I wanted to watch something. I said yes. We sat side by side the way we always did, like strangers pretending to be us. He laughed at something on the screen. I don't remember what. I laughed too, just enough. That night while he slept beside me, I lay still with my eyes open, staring at the ceiling fan. Each slow rotation was a thought, a calculation, not of revenge, of timing, because I didn't want to break him with fury. I wanted silence to speak for me, the kind of silence that arrives wrapped in ribbon, delivered with care, addressed to the woman who once said she couldn't wait to have me as a son-in-law. And in my calendar, I marked a small red circle on a future Saturday, not as a reminder, but as a promise. The images didn't go away. Not when I closed the album, not when I turned off my phone. They lived beneath my eyelids, as crisp as the day they were taken. Hotel beds, all made in the same way, with that stiff white tuck at the corners. Rooms with too many cushions and no dust. His face pressed against someone else's neck, his hand resting just low enough to say, "This isn't just flirting. This is where I am now." Each photo was a splinter, not a blade, not a burn, just a small, sharp invasion into the memory of who I thought he was. And they didn't hurt all at once. They lodged themselves quietly, one by one, behind every conversation we'd ever had. Each, "I'm working late," now rewrote itself. Each, "just grabbing lunch with a friend," returned to my mind as a scene, complete with timestamps and unbuttoned shirts. I began revisiting our life, not to relive it, but to re-examine the footage. I remembered the time we canceled dinner with my parents because he said he had a migraine. The same night, he had checked into a hotel 30 minutes away. I remembered the sweater he wore coming home late that Friday, smelling of something I couldn't name. In one of the photos, that same sweater was folded neatly at the foot of a bed that wasn't ours. And then, as if the universe couldn't resist cruel symmetry, I found the engagement announcement. Not ours, of course, theirs, posted quietly on the other man's account. Just a ring, 2 hands, and the words, "He said yes." The comments were filled with heart emojis and congratulations from people who had no idea what else that yes had cost. I didn't throw the phone. I didn't scream into a pillow. I sat down and read through the comments, one by one, like they were pages from a novel I hadn't known I was a character in. Somewhere between envy and numbness, I felt something shift. Not anger, not grief. Just the slow, cooling withdrawal of warmth from a room that used to be mine. He walked in later that night with takeout. Thai again, my favorite. He offered me the first spring roll. I took it. He asked if I wanted extra chili. I nodded, and when he spooned the pasta onto my plate and asked if I wanted more cheese, I smiled and said yes. The truth was sitting quietly on the table between us, wrapped in rice paper, dipped in silence. I began collecting the details like someone might press dying flowers between the pages of a book. Not because I wanted to keep them, but because I needed proof that they once lived. I went back through our shared calendar, his old text messages, the receipts we used to throw in the drawer by the fridge. I compared dates, not out of obsession, but precision. I wanted to understand the exact shape of the lie. He had kissed me the night before their anniversary weekend. The photo said they'd been in Chicago then. He told me he was visiting a friend. I remember packing his travel bag. I folded the jeans he wore in the pictures. I ironed the shirt that ended up in someone else's hotel mirror. I even tucked a small note into the inside pocket. Just a little message. "I love you. Stay safe." I wonder now if he ever read it, or if it fell onto a different floor, crumpled in someone else's hands. I searched for the other man, not to blame him, but to see what kind of story he had been told. His profile was polished, all muted tones, soft smiles, filtered brunches. There were pictures of them together, scattered across months. Some public, some hidden in folders only visible to tagged friends. The captions spoke of love that was worth the wait. Love that felt like coming home. Love that was ready to become something official. I looked at those words, then back at the photo of our hallway. Our worn-out rug, the dent in the kitchen cabinet, the crooked picture frame from our road trip. All the things he never shared. All the parts of our life too messy to post. For days, I didn't say anything. I moved around the apartment the way one moves in a museum after closing hours, quietly, cautiously, reverently, Every object seemed louder in the silence. The sound of the kettle, the click of his belt, the zipper of his bag. I watched him put on cologne I hadn't seen in months. He never used to wear that scent. It was too sweet for me. Now he wore it often. Maybe the other man liked it. Still, I kissed him goodbye before work. I asked if he wanted anything from the store. I laughed at his stories, even the ones I'd heard before. Not because I was pretending to love him, but because I was watching the man I used to love vanish in real time. And part of me wanted to remember every moment of his disappearance. I thought about confronting him, once, maybe twice, but every time the thought rose, it collapsed under the weight of another image, another detail, another moment that felt more like theater than intimacy. I wasn't ready for a scene. I didn't want screaming. What I wanted was clarity, cold, clinical, complete. Not for him, for me. So I studied him, not with suspicion, but detachment. Like an artist might study a finished painting to find where the brush strokes lost meaning. I noticed he no longer asked me how my day was. He used to, even when he was distracted. Now his greetings came prepackaged. Hey, with a tired smile, a kiss that grazed my cheek like routine. He'd scroll through his phone while I talked. I stopped mid-sentence more than once to see if he'd notice. He didn't. There was a dinner with friends where he sat next to me but leaned away when he laughed. His hand used to find mine under the table. That night, it didn't move. His phone buzzed twice. He excused himself. When he returned, his voice was lighter, his eyes slightly distant. Everyone else kept talking. I watched the condensation slide down his glass, forming a perfect ring on the table. At home, he slept with his back to me. I used to curl into it, stealing warmth. Now, I stared at the space between us, measuring it like a wound. There was no fight, no final straw, just the slow retreat of something that used to hold us in place. One afternoon, while he was in the shower, I opened his desk drawer, not to snoop, not to trap, just to understand. Inside was a receipt for a ring. Not mine, not our style. A tiny box of mints I didn't buy. A parking stub from a hotel downtown. I picked it up, stared at the timestamp. It was from a Tuesday. He said he was stuck late at work that day. I remember because I had waited up, warming his dinner twice. I put everything back exactly as I found it. That evening, he asked if I wanted to watch something. I nodded. We sat on the couch, a blanket across our laps like nothing had changed. Halfway through the movie, he rested his head on my shoulder. I didn't move. I just let it stay there, heavy, warm, familiar, like a ghost pretending it hadn't died. I think he thought things were fine, that I had stopped asking questions because there were no more to ask. But the silence between us was not peace. It was preparation. I marked the day the shift became irreversible. It wasn't dramatic. He didn't confess. There were no apologies, no lipstick on a collar, no message left open by mistake. It was, as always, subtle, quiet, like the difference between a room with someone in it and a room still holding the warmth of where they once sat. He walked through the door carrying 2 coffees. Mine had almond milk. He remembered. He handed it to me like always. Then, without warning, he said, "I think I'm going to propose soon." I froze. Not because he was speaking to me, but because I realized, with crystal clarity, that he wasn't. It wasn't a slip of the tongue. It wasn't a test. It was a moment he thought was private, made public by accident. His eyes weren't on me when he said it. He was looking at his phone, smiling. The kind of smile people wear when they're texting someone they shouldn't. I didn't ask who. I didn't need to. I didn't. I took a sip of the coffee. It was too sweet. I drank it anyway. Later that day, he suggested we go out for dinner. Somewhere nice. I dressed well. He complimented me. Said I looked good in that color. I thanked him. He held my hand across the table. The same hand that had clicked through those hotel reservations. The same hand I had once kissed after he'd burned it on a pan. I let him hold mine until the food arrived. He ordered pasta. I let him choose for both of us. He always said I was indecisive. He asked if I wanted extra cheese. I smiled. I said yes. We talked about small things, weekend plans, a new series we might start. He said he was thinking of visiting his mother again soon. I told him she'd probably love that. She always loved surprises. He didn't know that I had already prepared one. That night, I lay in bed beside him, listening to the rhythm of his breath, steady and unburdened. My phone screen lit up with the calendar reminder I had set days ago. Just a simple note. Start printing. And as I stared at that single sentence glowing in the dark, I whispered one thought to myself. He didn't know the day his life cracked open, but I marked it. I didn't leave right away. That's what surprises most people when I tell the story. Not that he cheated, but that I stayed. For weeks. Sharing meals, sharing a bed, sharing toothpaste. I stayed while he texted her goodnight in another room. I stayed while he washed the sheets we both knew weren't only ours. I stayed because the silence between us had become my study. I watched him like a man taking notes on an animal that used to be a pet, now grown half wild. He didn't notice. That's the part that still stuns me. He didn't notice the shift. How I stopped correcting the way he folded towels. How I no longer reminded him to water the plants. How I didn't refill the sugar jar when it ran out. He thought I was tired. Maybe he thought I was forgiving. But I wasn't either. I was erasing myself slowly from his routines, making room for the absence to come. During the day, I went to work like normal, smiled at coworkers, answered emails. But at night, I printed, page after page, photo after photo. Every image I had saved, archived, renamed, cataloged. I printed them on heavy matte paper, so they wouldn't tear easily. I arranged them not by date, but by impact. The ones where he looked the happiest went on top, as if joy could make guilt heavier. I bought a box. Not just any box, a gift box. Soft ivory silk on the inside, a warm gold ribbon on the outside. I lined the bottom with tissue paper. Not because it needed protection, but because I wanted the illusion of care. It had to feel like a present. It had to be opened like one. Each night while he slept, I wrote. Little notes, not angry, not bitter, just dated captions, quiet facts, frozen truths. Chicago, while I booked the dinner reservation you forgot. The day after our anniversary. When your mother asked me if you seemed distracted lately, I didn't write my name on anything. I didn't need to. There was no grand plan yet. Just a pulse. A hum beneath my skin. I knew the silence I was crafting would be louder than any accusation. And I wasn't preparing it for him. I was preparing it for her. The woman who had raised him. The woman who once hugged me in her hallway and whispered, "I've never seen him this settled." I wanted her to see what that calm had cost. I began researching addresses. It started innocently. Just a search for the zip code of the neighborhood his mother lived in. Then the street. Then the house. Google Maps gave me a blurred front yard, a crooked mailbox, a car I recognized from the last holiday dinner. I remembered standing in that driveway, arms full of pie and red wine, being told I was already family. That was 2 winters ago, before I knew I'd one day mail that family a package designed to dismantle their son. She had a favorite flower, peonies. I remembered because she had once told me they reminded her of her own mother. I chose a card with peonies on the front, blank inside. I didn't write in it. Words weren't necessary anymore. The truth didn't need punctuation. There were still nights when he touched me, casually, out of habit. A hand on my lower back while reaching for a glass. A shoulder bump in the hallway. Each time I registered the contact the way you feel a stranger brush past in a crowd. Something incidental. A presence you don't react to. I think he believed we were in a better place. That my quiet had meant resolution, not withdrawal. He started leaving his phone out again, unlocked. As if secrets, once discovered, could be undone. I didn't touch it. I didn't need to anymore. I had already downloaded what mattered. Screenshots, dates, geotags. Some of them weren't even hidden, just sitting there in plain sight. Pride, maybe, or stupidity. Either way, he had given me the firewood. All I had to do was pass it to someone who knew how to burn. The day of the family gathering was set. A Sunday lunch at his mother's house. She wanted everyone there. His sister, the nieces, a few neighbors she liked to show off for. He had mentioned it in passing, like it was just another chore. I smiled when he said it, asked what dessert we should bring. He said maybe I could bake that lemon tart she liked. I said I'd think about it. That night, while he snored softly beside me, I booked overnight delivery. The box, the photos, the ribbon, the card, all addressed carefully. To the woman who raised him. No return label, no signature, only silence, sealed in paper and ink. I didn't feel triumphant. I didn't feel cruel. I felt something close to reverence, like I was handling something fragile, a truth that had waited long enough to be seen. I began moving small things out of the apartment. Slowly, one book at a time. A framed photo that I replaced with another, slightly off-center, hoping he wouldn't notice the shift. My spare charger. A mug I loved. Socks he never saw me wear. Items so mundane they slipped through the cracks of his attention. I didn't want confrontation. I wanted erasure. Not of me, but of the space I had taken up. So when I was gone, it would feel less like a departure and more like a dissolve. He kept making plans. A weekend away, a friend's birthday, a couple's dinner with someone from his office. I said yes to everything, smiled through it all. I even added events to our shared calendar so he wouldn't sense anything amiss. But my private calendar, the one he didn't know about, had different dates circled. One for the package, one for my lease signing, one labeled simply, gone. In the evenings, I continued our routine. Pasta on Thursdays, movie night on Fridays. He leaned into me again during films, letting his arm rest behind my shoulders like a bridge that once held weight. I let it stay. But I never leaned back. I didn't have to. The distance between us had already grown teeth. There was something almost sacred in the waiting. I watched him eat with the same mouth that had told me I was his home. I watched his hands gesture animatedly while retelling stories I'd already heard. I memorized the curve of his laugh, not because I cherished it, but because I wanted to know it by heart before I never heard it again. On the Saturday before the lunch, he asked me to iron his shirt, the blue one, the one his mother said brought out his eyes. I did it without comment, pressed each fold with care, hung it by the door. When he walked past me that evening, he kissed the top of my head and said, "You're the best." I didn't flinch. I didn't smile. I just filed the moment away next to all the others. There is a silence that pretends to be peace. And then there is a silence that is strategy. I was living in the latter. Not because I wanted revenge, but because I wanted clarity. And sometimes, the clearest things are seen not in the heat of confrontation, but in the stillness that follows something broken. He went to bed early that night, tired from work, already dreaming of the weekend. I stayed up late, rechecking the delivery status. It was on track, out for arrival by 10 a.m. the next morning. A gift, signed by no one, speaking louder than anything I could ever say. The morning of the lunch, he wore the blue shirt. I watched him button it slowly, humming a song he probably didn't realize he'd been singing all week. He asked if I thought his hair looked okay. I said it did. He picked a bottle of wine from the shelf, one his mother liked. Asked if we should bring flowers. I said maybe next time. He didn't notice the absence of the tart he'd requested, or if he did, he didn't mention it. We left the apartment together, like any other couple attending a family gathering. We walked side by side down the stairs, his hand grazing mine once, lightly, like it used to. At the corner, he hailed a car. I told him I'd meet him there, said I had a quick errand. He didn't question it. He nodded and kissed my cheek. The same cheek he had kissed 100 times. This one landed slightly off-center. When the car pulled away, I didn't move. I waited until it disappeared around the bend. Then I turned around, walked back up the stairs, unlocked the door, and stepped inside the apartment that still smelled faintly of his cologne and starch. I sat on the couch. The silence was sudden and complete. I didn't cry. I didn't pace. I just sat. Somewhere across town, a box was being opened. A soft white lid peeled back to reveal truths wrapped in precision. The photos, the captions, the deliberate arrangement of moments he had chosen to hide, now lit in the middle of a living room full of family. I imagined her hands, slow, maybe trembling, pulling out the first photo, confused, the second, startled, the third, devastated. I pictured the weight shifting in the room, the glances exchanged, the breathless hush falling like a curtain. A fork paused mid-air, a throat cleared, then silenced, and then nothing. Just the soft sound of paper moving in the hands of a woman who once told me I reminded her of herself when she was young. I didn't check my phone. I didn't wait for his call. I boiled water, made tea, opened a window. Somewhere, the truth was delivering itself, without rage, without theatrics, just images, just facts, just the quiet architecture of betrayal, arriving gift-wrapped in the colors of celebration. And as I stirred my tea, watching the spiral of milk bloom and vanish, I thought of what would happen next. The voices, the panic, the questions, his hands shaking as he dialed, her voice rising, then breaking, a woman running from a room, a mother sitting down slowly. But here, in this room, nothing moved. The kettle cooled, the mug warmed my palms, and for the first time in weeks, I felt full. The first message came just after noon, a name I hadn't seen in weeks. One of his friends, the loud one who used to bring wine and forget people's birthdays. His text was short, blunt. "What the hell did you do?" No greeting. No punctuation after the question mark. Just 5 words loaded with confusion, maybe anger, maybe awe. I didn't reply. Then another. His sister this time. Someone I used to text memes to at 2 a.m. Someone who once cried in front of me after a breakup. Her tone was different, less accusing. "I don't know what's happening, but you should probably talk to someone." She didn't say his name. She didn't need to. My phone buzzed again. Then again, missed calls, more texts, a barrage. Some names I didn't recognize, mutual friends, acquaintances, people we'd dined with only once but who now felt entitled to demand context. I let the screen light up until the battery slipped under 10%, then turned it over on the table. The sunlight caught on the edge of the mug beside it, casting a soft, long shadow across the wood. I imagined the scene unfolding in real time, the box arriving, the smiles as they assumed it was something sweet, sentimental, maybe even part of a proposal. I pictured his mother, graceful as ever, pulling the ribbon loose. The silence that must have followed when the first image slid into view. His face, someone else's hands. The caption, "Chicago, while I booked dinner for our anniversary." No one would speak first. That's how these things go. The breath held. The eyes scanning for explanation. The denial trying to rise but drowning under the weight of photographic proof. I imagined her eyes narrowing, her shoulders stiffening, her throat going dry as she flipped to the second photo, then the third, each one an indictment. And then her voice, maybe soft, maybe sharp, cutting through the air with a single question. "Did you know?" The moment where the floor shifts beneath a family, and no one knows where to stand anymore. Glasses half raised, forks abandoned, a future derailed in the space between snapshots. And I wasn't there. That was the beauty of it. I didn't need to raise my voice or explain myself or justify the quiet with anything louder than truth. I had become an absence that shouted louder than any presence ever could. He called me 14 times that day. I didn't answer the first, or the second. By the third, I had turned off vibration. By the fifth, I stopped checking who it was. I left the phone face down on the windowsill, watched the light shift across the floor as afternoon crept toward evening. There was a kind of peace in knowing the storm had begun without needing to stand in its eye. The voicemails came next, his voice tight and uneven, trying on different tones, confused, apologetic, angry, desperate. At one point he even laughed, a short, cracked sound, like he was rehearsing for a version of this where it had all been a misunderstanding. But there were no misunderstandings. Just photographs, just timestamps, just silence where lies used to live. I listened to none of it. The next text was longer, one of those blocks of pleading that try to stitch a narrative out of falling threads. "I don't know what you think you saw. It wasn't like that. I never meant for you to find out that way." That line stopped me. I never meant for you to find out that way. Not that he hadn't done it. Not that it hadn't been real. Just that I'd found out wrong. As if betrayal had a proper channel. As if discovery needed an invitation. Later, someone sent me a photo from the lunch. A blurry shot, taken in panic or disbelief. His mother seated, frozen, a single photograph dangling from her hand. He stood behind her, caught mid-sentence, mouth open, eyes unfocused. In the corner of the frame, a wine glass had tipped, its contents blooming across a tablecloth like blood in water. No one was smiling. There were rumors he followed the woman outside, the one he had promised something to, the one whose fingers had curled around his in too many hotel rooms. She'd screamed in the driveway, thrown something. He didn't run after her, and back in the house, no one knew what to say. There's no script for that kind of moment. No etiquette for when a mother is handed evidence of who her son has become. No rules for the silence that follows a future collapsing. The photo stayed on my phone. I didn't share it, didn't forward it. I just stared at it once, let the quiet satisfaction settle like dust on my chest, and then I deleted it. Not out of regret, but because I didn't need to keep the evidence. I had already made my point. By the time his last message came, it was already dark. It wasn't long. No more sprawling explanations or layered justifications. Just one line. Simple. Final. Please, just say something. I read it once. Then again. The desperation was palpable. Not because he missed me, but because the silence was no longer under his control. I hadn't yelled. I hadn't broken things. I hadn't made a scene or sent warnings. I had simply vanished, leaving behind a set of curated truths wrapped in ribbon, placed gently in the hands of someone whose opinion he once cared about more than mine. That was the part he couldn't reconcile. People like him rely on noise. They survive by spinning stories faster than others can question them. They expect tears, confrontation, ultimatums, all tools they can twist, manage, survive. But silence? Silence is unfamiliar. It offers no foothold. It can't be reasoned with. And when it arrives, deliberate and unwavering, it becomes the thing they fear most. A mirror. His friends didn't call again. His sister unfollowed me quietly. A mutual acquaintance messaged a few days later, not to ask how I was, but to say, "That was brutal, honestly. Respect." I didn't reply. I wasn't collecting applause. I wasn't seeking witnesses. I didn't want to become a legend in someone else's group chat. What I wanted was already done. I walked past a florist the following afternoon. Peonies in the window. Pink, open, fragile. I thought of her, his mother, sitting in the quiet after everyone left. The ribbon untied, the box slightly ajar, the truth still lingering on her coffee table. I wondered if she stared at it for hours, if she tried to call me, if she looked for a note that wasn't there. I hadn't burned him. I hadn't even touched him. I had simply handed someone else the match. And as I walked past the flower shop, I realized that maybe I didn't hate him. Not really. Hate requires energy. Hate demands investment. What I felt was thinner than that. A kind of weightless recognition. Like spotting a crack in a wall you once leaned on, realizing it had always been there. You just hadn't looked close enough. The city kept moving. Buses still ran. People still laughed in coffee shops. But for him, time had split. There was before the box and after. I had given him no space to argue, no angle to spin, no version to defend, only evidence, delivered without emotion, received in front of everyone. And now, all he had left was the sound of his own voice echoing into a silence I no longer shared. The last thing I sent him was a message, not an explanation, not a goodbye, just a sentence, 8 words that weighed more than any confrontation ever could. "You said I meant nothing. Now you know what nothing feels like." I didn't wait for a response. I didn't check if it was read. I turned off notifications, not out of cruelty, but closure. I had said what needed saying, not to open a door, but to seal it. People asked later if I missed him, if I regretted not staying to work things out, as if betrayal were a crack that could be patched with enough talking. as if deception were something you could scrub clean from a shared toothbrush or a pillow still holding the shape of his head. But I didn't miss him. I missed who I thought he was, and that person had never existed. In the days that followed, I watched the fallout from a distance. His social media went quiet. Photos disappeared. Mutual friends shifted loyalties in silence. Some unfriended me, some unfriended him. Others hovered in the middle, unsure which side held the truth. I didn't correct anyone. The beauty of evidence is that it doesn't require your voice to echo it. There's something strange about watching someone unravel from afar. You start to see how much of them was built on performance. His charm, once magnetic, now rang hollow in other people's retellings. His stories, once funny, now came with an aftertaste. I had removed myself from the frame, but the frame itself was beginning to crack, and still I said nothing. The power in silence isn't just in what it withholds, it's in what it makes others confront. Without distractions, without spin, without the comfort of denial. He had to sit with what he'd done, with the image of his mother holding those photos, with the knowledge that every lie he'd told had arrived, printed and labeled, in front of the people whose approval he once needed most. I moved through my days quietly, grocery shopping, reading, relearning how to be alone. There were moments when his name floated through my mind like background noise, faint, irrelevant, like a radio station I no longer tuned into. One night, I passed by a wedding boutique. A couple stood outside laughing, pointing at rings in the display. I watched them for a moment, long enough to remember what hope used to feel like. Then I turned and walked away. No more photos, no more messages, no more noise, just me and a silence I had earned. I left quietly. No grand announcements, no handwritten notes on the kitchen table, no final look over my shoulder. Just a morning like any other, with the sunlight filtering through curtains I once picked out with him, landing on a floor I no longer cared to clean. The boxes were already gone. I had been moving them slowly for weeks, one by one, under the guise of decluttering. A coat I no longer wore. A stack of books I said I wanted to donate. A plant he never watered, now wilting in someone else's window. By the time I walked out for the last time, all that remained was enough to make the apartment look lived in, but not loved in. The difference I knew now was everything. I didn't tell anyone where I was going. I didn't update my address. I changed my number, got a new SIM card, closed old accounts, not because I was running, but because I wanted to see who would still try to find me without access. The answer was simple. No one who mattered. I found a small studio on the edge of a different city, just big enough for a bed, a desk, a window that caught the afternoon light. The landlord didn't ask questions. The neighbors didn't know my name. For the first time in years, I felt invisible. It was oddly comforting. I wasn't rebuilding. I was unbuilding, carefully dismantling every version of myself that had existed in relation to him. The silence followed me there. Not the uncomfortable kind that presses against your temples, but the soft kind that settles into the walls like steam after a shower. No one called my name. No footsteps approached the door. I woke when I wanted, ate when I remembered. The days passed without agenda, just breath and time, and the slow unfurling of something I hadn't felt in a long time. Peace. I didn't look him up. I didn't wonder if he tried to explain me away. Maybe he said I was unstable, overdramatic. Maybe he blamed stress or temptation or a moment of weakness. I didn't care. The gift of walking away is that you no longer need the truth to be believed by anyone else. You just need to believe it enough to keep walking. Some memories returned without warning, not the dramatic ones, not the betrayal or the photos or the day I mailed the box. Those were already tucked away, folded neatly into the past like clothes that no longer fit. What resurfaced were the softer fragments, the ones with no sharp edges, just echoes. His laugh echoing down a grocery store aisle. The way he used to flick water at me when washing dishes. The warmth of his body against mine on cold mornings before either of us dared leave the blanket. They didn't hurt, not exactly. They hovered, like the scent of someone else's cologne lingering on your sweater after a brief embrace. Uninvited, faint, temporary. I didn't push them away. I let them arrive, settle, and leave. That was the difference now. Before, I would have clung to them, proof that it wasn't all bad, that there had been something real. But reality doesn't cancel itself out just because it splits. The good had existed, so had the lie, and now both belong to the same archive. Closed, untouched. There was a day, maybe 3 weeks after I'd left, when I saw a man on the train who looked like him. Not exactly, just enough to make my pulse pause. Same height, same slope of shoulders, same way of checking his phone with his thumb curled at the top. I didn't stare. I just shifted my gaze, looked out the window, and let the city move past. I realized then that I no longer felt fear. No anxiety about running into him. No need to explain myself to anyone. No script rehearsed in my head. That was the truest freedom I had earned. Not from him, but from the version of myself who would have needed closure. That version was gone now, and I hadn't even noticed her leave. The silence I lived in no longer felt like absence. It felt like architecture. Something I had built, slowly and with purpose, to shelter the self I was rediscovering. I bought a new kettle, a new pair of slippers. I rearranged the small kitchen 4 times before it felt like mine. No one commented, no one cared, and that was perfect. Healing, I learned, doesn't announce itself. It doesn't arrive with trumpets or milestones. It sneaks in while you're doing something else. Cutting fruit, changing sheets, reading the same sentence twice and finally understanding it. It's the moment you catch yourself humming without knowing when you started. And one night, I hummed, softly, while brushing my teeth. A tune I hadn't thought of in years. It had nothing to do with him. And that was the point. It happened in a grocery store. I was reaching for a box of tea, one I hadn't bought in years, one I only remembered because he used to steal the last bag and swear he didn't. And there she was, his mother, standing at the end of the aisle, staring at a row of canned beans, as if the shape of her world still hadn't realigned. Her hair was pinned up the way she always wore it, neat but not fussy. She looked smaller than I remembered, or maybe I had just grown taller in the time since. For a second, she didn't see me. I had the advantage of distance, of time. I could have turned, walked away, disappeared between shelves like a ghost who never needed to haunt anyone again. But I didn't move. I just watched her. The woman who had once pressed a scarf into my hands on a windy day. The woman who once said, "Take care of him, won't you?" Then her eyes lifted. Met mine. There was no shock, no gasp. Just a moment of recognition. Quiet, heavy, like a window finally opening in a sealed room. Her gaze held mine for only a second before she looked down again, picked up a can she didn't need, placed it in her cart, turned and walked away. No words, no nod, no apology, and that, somehow, was perfect. I didn't need her to explain. I didn't need her to say, "You were right." Some truths don't require validation. They just need air. I had already aired mine. She had received them, seen them, held them in her hands. What she chose to do with them was never my burden. I finished shopping, paid in cash, walked home with a bag that felt lighter than it should have. Not because of the items inside, but because I wasn't carrying the weight of wondering anymore. Later that night, I made the tea. It didn't taste like memory. It just tasted like tea. And when I poured the last of it into the sink before bed, I didn't think of him. Not even once. Time didn't rush to heal me. There was no cinematic montage of moving on. No spontaneous haircut, no sudden career pivot, no rebound relationship to blur the outlines of what had been. There was just time. Unremarkable, undramatic, unfolding in slow, steady increments. I didn't become someone new. I just stopped being someone edited for someone else. I found comfort in rituals he never knew. Morning walks without earbuds. Rearranging my bookshelf by color, then by mood, then alphabetically, then not at all. I started cooking for one again, learning the quiet math of single portions. I talked to plants I hadn't named. I watered them because I wanted something to depend on me that wasn't a lie. Some nights, I still woke up at 3 a.m., not from nightmares, but from muscle memory. The body remembers before the mind does, but the ache faded faster each time. And soon, waking up became just waking up. I didn't date, not because I was afraid, but because I was full. There was no void to fill, no ache begging for a distraction. I had learned finally to be alone without being lonely, to enjoy my own company without apology. And in that stillness, I met a version of myself I had neglected for years, quiet, observant, capable of kindness without attachment. And when people asked, much later, why I had done what I did, why I sent the photos, why I vanished, why I chose silence instead of spectacle, I never gave them the full story. I just said, sometimes the loudest way to leave is quietly. They usually nodded, pretending to understand. But they didn't. Not really. Only one person did. And she didn't need to say a word. I didn't destroy him. That was never the point. I didn't want ruin. I wanted removal. Not of him. From me. I had simply handed someone else the match and walked away before the fire began. And if she chose to watch what she raised burn quietly, that was her decision. I never looked back.